Thanks for staying with us. This is Newsline. I'm Michael Chigani, and my very special guest this evening is Mr. Henry Tang, who, as I said, could end up being our next Chief Executive. Now, Mr. Tang, I'm sure you're hoping that you will end up being the next Chief Executive.
Yes, I run to win.
Yeah, that's the kind of determination I think we need in Hong Kong. Now, before the break, we talked about the wealth gap. You mentioned there are a number of things that create this wealth gap. You've got the best and the brightest coming because of immigration policy, and you've also got 150 people coming from the mainland every day. You've got our services, our finance, the stock market, and that attracts high salaries. So there is a wealth gap, and as you pointed out, it's happening in most other Western capitalist societies.
And to exacerbate the problem even more, we have rising housing prices.
That's correct.
And then we have inflation that's driving up cost of living. And all of these issues are burning issues which affect people's everyday lives.
They're not only burning issues, they're issues that have lit a fuse. People are getting angry. And one of the things we ever get angry about, and I know you know this, is this so-called property tycoon hegemony, you know, 霸權, you know, and all this. You know, do you think that tycoons in Hong Kong are too powerful?
I think what we need is fair competition. I believe every community, when there is fair competition, Hong Kong people is never afraid of competition as long as it's fair.
Do we have fair? Do we have fair competition?
That piece of legislation is now just going through Legislative Council, and I hope that it will be enacted before the summer recess.
This is the anti-monopoly legislation.
Yes, the competition bill. The reason I use that issue is because I raised the issue of a legislation on competition when I was the financial secretary in one of the budgets. And the background is the financial secretary chairs the competition committee, where we examine allegations of unfair competition. Sometimes we come into a situation where I felt that in the absence of a legislation, it is not easy to impose fair competition.
But you know, we've had this for so long, Mr. Tang. I mean, you were the Chief Secretary of Hong Kong, and you raised it as a Financial Secretary of Hong Kong, going back quite a few years.
Yes.
And today, 2012, this is still being legislated. We haven't got it. People will say that you, as a Chief Secretary, could have done many, many things, like fix the housing problem, fix the wealth gap, introduce fair competition that you said, you know, we need in Hong Kong. Yet we don't have it. And people will say you have failed in your job. How would you respond to that?
The competition bill was introduced into LegCo some time ago, and it's going through now. I hope we can enact it before the summer recess. As far as some of the other problems is concerned,
housing, people can afford homes. Every time I talk about housing, I look at the camera and say, I cannot afford to buy a home in Hong Kong. I'm a middle-class person. I can't afford to buy a home. If you become the Chief Executive, can you help middle-class people buy homes?
Answer is yes.
How?
Answer is yes, because I will build more public rental housing for the general population. I want to continue to build a home ownership scheme for those who want to become become property owner as a first step. And I also want to build up our land reserve and use land as a supply side management to mitigate the housing prices. I believe our private sector housing should have a healthy and steady...
Should we ban mainlanders from buying housing? Your opponent, Siwa Leung, says we should ban them from new housing.
Think of what made Hong Kong successful. Hong Kong is successful because we are an open economy. We attract the best and the brightest to come to Hong Kong. And when they come here, they create a job and they create other ancillary employment together with it. So any government who is responsible should not change that policy of openness and inclusiveness.
So you're saying no, we should not ban mainlanders from buying homes?
I think we should, through our housing policy, introduce more land that we restrict, let's say, the size of the flats so that it becomes more middle-class housing per se. As far as mainlanders who wish to come and live in Hong Kong, I think we should have that same inclusive attitude as we have been home to many visitors from overseas.
That's a very clear answer. Now, one of the things that Albert Ho, the Democratic candidate, says he's running to force issues that you and Mr. See Wah Leung are not talking about, and one of the major issues is democracy. You know, we're going to have universal suffrage in 2011. We're going to have universal suffrage for the Legislative Council 2020, for the Chief Executive election 2017, right? So the next election, after this one, the 2012 one, the next one in 2017 will be universal suffrage. But people don't believe that we will get real universal suffrage. Can you look at the viewers today and say, if you're elected the chief executive, that you can assure everybody in Hong Kong that when we have universal suffrage in 2017 and 2020, that it is real universal suffrage?
In my election campaign meeting on December 19th, where over 1,000 people attended from all walks of life, across all walks of society, I made that pledge that I believe we are at this historical moment where we can realize, under one country, two system and basic law, we can have universal suffrage for the chief executive to be
real universal suffrage that people can believe in.
Of course it will be real.
You give that pledge today.
Of course it will be real. Any electoral method has to be open, fair and just. And I give my word that I will do my utmost to ensure that it is open and fair, in accordance with the basic law.
We'll all remember the word that you gave here today on Newsline. I'm going to move on. How do you differ from See Wah Leung? You and him are running. Why should people, we don't have the vote, but people can prefer a person. Why should people prefer you to See Wah Leung?
I believe my qualities are that I have a vision. I know what I want to see Hong Kong, because Hong Kong is my home, to be like in 5, 10 and 15 years. But the next 5 years will be crucial, because we are laying the foundation for the development of Hong Kong in the next 15 years, due to development in the mainland of their economic plans. And so I believe, both in terms of economic, in terms of democracy, in terms of social issues, the next 5 years will be crucial.
But how will you differ from See Wah Leung?
And secondly, we all have a certain vision, but a vision has to be able to be realized before it can become real.
You think you can?
So I believe I have the ability as well as the experience to bring it.
Well, you have been in government for a long time. But tell me this, how do you think your leadership will be different from the existing chief executive, Mr. Donald Tsang?
The differentiation will probably be partly in economics, because I tend to believe that we can be more proactive in terms of government's role in the market.
So Donald Tsang is not being proactive enough?
Well, the current chief executive is actually has very staunch belief in openness as well as fair competition together with free market. I also believe in market economy. I also believe in the capital system. But I believe we can take that step, one more step, a bit further. As far as social issues are concerned, every chief executive has in his heart to do the best for the people.
I've just got a minute left. I'm going to ask you, this is a painful subject for you, your extramarital affair. You have answered it many times, or you have not answered it, But the thing is, I'm going to ask you this. I'm not going to ask you about what you did or whether you have an illegitimate child. I'm not going to ask you about that. All I'm going to ask you is, do you feel it's hurt your campaign to a very large degree?
Of course it has made an impact on my campaign. But I believe by coming clean with it, apologized, and seek the forgiveness of my wife, family, and the community in Hong Kong, I have crossed that bridge and it's now behind me.
What is your advice to other husbands?
I really should not give advice on that front. Perhaps you can.
Well, you know, I watched a show you did with Chip Cho, the columnist Tolkien, and he dragged out a beautiful girl and said, what were you going to do with her? You give a very good answer, right?
Yes.
So you
I will introduce her to bachelor friends of mine in my office.
Okay. The last thing I want to ask you is this. You said everybody in Hong Kong can aspire to become Li Ka-shing. Do you regret saying that? Because maybe people feel that that was way out of line.
I believe that was taken out of context. The Hong Kong spirit is the can-do spirit. And that can-do spirit have made a lot of people from very humble beginnings to become very successful professionals.
So people can still become Li Ka-shing if they want.
And people can become successful through sheer hard work, through determination, and through confidence, believing in themselves, and I believe that spirit is still there.
Okay, well, let's hope so. Thanks for watching Newsline. See you next week. Good evening.